The devils and evil spirits of Babylonia, being Babylonian and Assyrian incantations against the demons, ghouls, vampires, hobgoblins, ghosts and kindred evil spirits, which attack mankind. Translated from the original cuneiform text with transliterations, vocabulary, notes, etc. by Thompson, R. Campbell or R. Campbell Thompson, Reginald Campbell, 1876 to 1941. Luzak's Semitic Text and Translation Series. Volume 14. Luzak's Semitic Text and Translation Series, from Volume 1 to Volume 14 displayed. It's continued on the next page. Actually goes right down to Volume 19. The Devils and Evil Spirits of Babylonia. Translated from the original cuneiform text with transliterations, vocabulary, notes, etc. by R. Campbell Thompson, M.A., Assistant in the Department of Egyptian and Assyrian Antiquities, British Museum, Volume 1, Evil Spirits. Part of the tablet supposed to contain a mention of the Babylonian Garden of Eden, K. 111. Preface. The object of the two volumes which form the present work is to supply the student of Assyrian demonology with English transliterations and translations, with the necessary notes, etc. of the documents, printed in the 16th and 17th parts of cuneiform text from Babylonian tablets, etc., which have been recently issued by the trustees of the British Museum in that era. Not of late. An examination of these two parts will show that they contain copies of all the tablets belonging to the series Utukiki, Numinuti, Asaki, Masute, and Te, i.e. evil spirits, fever, sickness and headache, which have now been identified together with the text of a considerable number of compositions of a similar character. These collections of evil spirit texts form large and important sections of the native literature concerning Babylonian and Assyrian demonology, and there is reason to believe that the material now published, or published thereafter, represents about one half of that belonging to the three series mentioned above, which was known to the scribes of Assurbanipal. Assurbanipal is Greek. You got a double S because they didn't have the sh sound in their language, so it would be Assurbanipal. Of the condition of the archetypes in pre-Babylonian times we have no information whatever, but there is no reason to doubt that the versions which were adopted as standard text in the reign of Assurbanipal represented substantially the readings of the primitive documents. We are, in short, justified in assuming that we have in our hands, at the present time, tolerably accurate copies of the exorcisms and spells which the Sumerian and his Babylonian successor employed some 6,000 or 7,000 years ago to avert the attacks of devils and to ward off malign influences of every kind. The first to make known to the world the character of evil spirit text was the late General H.C. Rawlinson, but G.C.B., who published in the fourth volume of the Cuneiform Inscriptions of Western Asia, London, 1875, as much of the text of the 5th and 16th tablets as had then been identified. During the period of the preparation of the 70 plates, which formed the fourth volume, printed copies of many of them were supplied to M. Francois Lenormand and to various other scholars. And M. Lenormand issued some months before the appearance of the British Museum publication his La, whatever that is in French, in which he gave renderings of several of the texts related to evil spirits. In the years 1887, Professor Safety, in his Hibbert lectures, gave English translations of the greater number of the texts with which M. Lenormand had already dealt, as well as of others. The translations, however, of both these scholars were necessarily incomplete, for the simple reason that only a portion of the available material had been published by the late Sir Henry Rawlinson, who made no pretence of publishing in his immortal corpus of cuneiform text, or endless body of cuneiform text, more than specimens of the various classes of literature which were known to the Babylonians and Assyrians. Subsequently, several of the texts of this class have been studied and referred to in the publications of various Assyriologists. But the present work, this particular work, represents the first attempt which has been made to deal with any of the groups of the evil spirit texts as a whole. And of course no connected translations of them have before appeared prior to this. In the following volumes of Messengers Luzak's Semitic Text and Translation Series, is that mysterious? It's like French, not too sure. Semitic Text and Translation Series, transliterations and translation of about 240 tablets and fragments belonging to various collections in the British Museum are given, and it is believed that about 160 of these are published in cuneiform text from Babylonian tablets, etc. Parts 16 and 17 for the first time. The present publication is intended to do for the Evil Spirit series and the series related to fevers and headaches what Professor Zimmerman has done for the Shupu series and Professor Tagfist for the Mark Clue series. The reader's attention is called to the fact that where it has been impossible to assign to tablets the correct position in the series, they have been indicated by the letters A, B, C, etc. In translating the text, the renderings into English have been made as literal as possible, and wherever possible the Assyrian word has been translated by the same English equivalent, or to the nearest English equivalent. The material given in the following pages will be found to afford abundant proof of the fact that a considerable portion of the magical practices which are in use in the East to the present day were well known to the inhabitants of Mesopotamia several thousands of years ago, and that many of them were borrowed by the Hebrews and other dwellers in Syria and Persia from their neighbours on the Tigris and Euphrates. As was to be expected, a number of misconceptions have arisen during the last few years, probably prior to this printing and publishing of this book, as to the purport of certain magical texts, and as an example of this may be especially mentioned the views which have been promulgated concerning Tablet K 183 L 183 FF, for it has been confidently asserted that this document contains an allusion to the biblical Garden of Eden. That was that cuneiform tablet text that we first saw. The text of this tablet mentions a place called Eridu and a plant or tree named Kizgkanu of dense growth and shining appearance, which grew beside the abyss, i.e. the ocean or sea. The place where the plant grew was said to be the couch of a god. Immediately following these statements is a reference to Shamash and Tammuz, who are said to dwell in its interior, and mentioned as next made of the mouths of the rivers. Such are the statements of the tablet, but basing their opinion on certain interpretations of the above text, some Assyriologists have asserted that the Babylonian Garden of Eden was in the immediate vicinity of Eridu, and they have identified the tree or plant with the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which was believed to grow in the Hebrew paradise. Quite recently, prior to this book, however, the missing portion of this text has been identified, and it is now clear that the text is an incantation and nothing more. This document, the opening lines of which have been so strangely misunderstood, indicated to the magician who was about to treat his afflicted patient that a certain kind of plant or tree, the original of which, according to tradition, grew in Eridu and afforded a dwelling to Shamash and Tammuz, contained magical properties, and acting on this information, the magician was directed to make use of a portion of the Kizkanu plant or tree on behalf of the said patient. The text actually states that the gods themselves had made use of this plant to work a miracle of healing, and the implication is that as the Kizkanu plant was on this occasion of great benefit, it may again be made to perform the healing of a sufferer, always provided that suitable words of power were recited by a duly qualified person and appropriate ceremonies were performed before the plant itself was used as a remedy. Thus, there is no reason for believing that the text of Tablet K contains any allusion to the Garden of Eden, or that the plant Kizkanu is anything more than a herb or a shrub which was used in working magic. Further, the identification of the Kizkanu plant with the vine is nothing to rest upon, and still does it in any way Still less does it in any way represent the Babylonian equivalent of the Tree of Life. The mouths of the rivers have nothing to do with the four rivers of the Hebrew paradise, i.e. Euphrates, Tigris, Gishon, and the new fragments leaves no room for doubt that the line in which they are mentioned merely explains the locality from which the gods obtained the plant, namely from the confluence of two streams or rivers. Okay, and he shows his appreciation to those who helped him, and one of them is Wallace Budge. And here's a list of tablets, the plates. It continues. Introduction. From the earliest times, Eastern races, in common with the rest of mankind, have always held a firm belief in the existence of evil spirits, ghosts, and all kindred powers. The phenomena of death, the mystery of disease and sickness, and all the other events of common occurrence in a daily life gave rise to speculations about the unseen world, which gradually led to a distinction, although slight at all times, between good and evil spirits. The early Semitic people of Babylonia, whoever they may have been or wherever they may have migrated from, found a theology ready to their hands in their adopted country, which they took over from its primitive inhabitants, the Sumerians, doubtless grafting to it many of the beliefs of their forefathers. To the latest times, down to a century or two before the Christian era, they retained the doctrines in their original language, making interlinear translations of them for use in the temples and among the doctors, and it is owing to this that we can speak with tolerable certainty on many points of the early religion of Babylonia. There is little comparatively that shows traces of original Semitic composition in the books and documents relating to spirits, for by far the greater part of the enormous mass of material of this class is written in the Sumerian language, either with or without a Babylonian or Assyrian translation, and the numerous Sumerian words for the various forms of spirits and demons were either incorporated bodily in the newcomer's language, with of course the necessary phonetic changes, or were translated either exactly or paraphrastically, kind of a hard word there. And it carries on, and then it explains the Semitic recognized gods, singular Elu, plural Ilani, in common with the rest of his stock. He seems to have had some idea that the soul, or Ikimu, literally the thing which is snatched away. Okay, he's got down here footnote. The original meaning of Elu, like the Hebrew, is of course unknown. The Sumerians indicated the word God by a star, and we are therefore justified in assuming that the Sumerians believed that their gods inhabited the sky. In 2, the form Ikimu is distinctly against the view that it means the snatcher, which would probably be Ikimu. Okay, it's got a single M. It's only one M. So that's probably the difference between the two. So beyond this, it is exceedingly difficult to say how much of his later psychology and eschatology was original, and how much was borrowed. Ikimu, literally the thing which is snatched away, possessed supernatural powers, or at least in existence, but beyond this it is exceedingly difficult to say how much was later psychology and eschatology was original and how much was borrowed. This much seems certain, however, that words like Utukuku, spirit, and Allah, demon Lila, some forms of ghost with feminine counterparts Lilitu, and Adat Lily, and probably Galu, whatever those words are, devil, were all borrowed from the Sumerians, and the names of two others, Rabishu, that's in the Brita. That's where Cain is confronted by God because he has this frown, upside down frown, right, with this clown frown, because he's God's displeased with his sacrifice that he presented. So he says, why have you got a frown, if you know what's right, you would you'd have done right. And he says, Rabishu sits at your door or crouches at your door, meaning your mind's gate, the door to your mind, and he wants to come in and he wants to rule you, overpower you. So we know it's that from that Brita in the ancient Aramaic, Tab Esher, or Lishana Atika Sapra, of the Tab Esher, and because of this indication under this S, it's probably Rabbi Shu. Lurker and Ahazu Caesar, because Lurker, he's sitting there, he's crouching at the door of your mind, wanting to come in and rule you, overpower you and rule you. And Ahazu Caesar are probably the three renderings of Sumerian words for which the Babylonian had no exact equivalents. All these words occur in set phrases constantly in the Incantations, and of the other names for spirits we find the following list: Ilu, Ikumu, Sidu, Labatu, Labasu, Lamasusu. Looks like it's got a lot of U's on the end of it. Of these, the first two have already been explained, but of the linguistic origin of the remainder, very little is known. Indeed, among the other Semitic tribes, with the exception of the Arabs, the comparative paucity of words signifying demons is very marked, and most of the few which they employ are borrowed directly from Babylonia. The Hebrews using, and there is in the Hebrew, i.e. Sadu, and Lelutu, and in rabbinic times, Lilu, which is another word used by the rabbis to mean spirit, is the ordinary word in Hebrew for this, and corresponds to Ekimu. It is therefore evident that when the Semitic Babylonian took over the learning of his Sumerian predecessors, as he came before him, he seems also to have unconsciously adapted and enlarged his ideas to fit their beliefs, receiving their doctrines in their entirety as worthy of implicit trust, and in the belief that his teachers must necessarily understand the supernatural powers peculiar to their own country. 1. The various classes of evil spirits. The primitive Sumerian recognized three distinct classes of evil spirit, all ready to torment the hapless wanderer. And there's a footnote at the bottom. For the special meaning of this word in magical text, they recommend you see Infra, paragraph 28, page 28. The primitive Sumerian recognized three distinct classes of evil spirit, all ready to torment the hapless wanderer. First came the disembodied human soul, which could find no rest, and so wandered up and down the face of the earth. Secondly, the gruesome spirits, which were half human and half demon. And thirdly, the fiends and devils, who were of the same nature as the gods, who rode on the noxious winds or brought storms and pestilence. Each of these three kinds was divided up into classes according to the several characteristics of the evil spirits which composed them, and the six chief of these are enumerated in the constantly recurring line: Utugu, Limnu, Alu, Limnu, Ekamu, Limnu, Galu, Limnu, Ilu, Limnu, Rabishu, Limnu. Evil spirit, evil demon, evil ghost, evil devil, evil god, evil fiend. But this by no means includes all the powers of evil, for this list is frequently amplified by the additions Labatu, Labashu, Ahasu, Lilu, Lilulutu, Adat, Lili, all various forms of malignant spirits. The first evil spirit, Utuku, was originally a spectre or ghost, since it is once at least used of the spectre of a dead man raised from the underworld. And someone wrote some notes next to it about a ghost, something of a ghost. Spectre of a dead man raised from the underworld. This form of magic, necromancy, was a favourite method employed for looking into the future in the East in ancient times, and a remarkable instance of it occurs in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The story runs that the hero Gilgamesh appeals to the god Nugal to restore his friend Eabani to him, and his prayer is answered, for the god opens the earth and the Utugu of Eabani rises up like the wind. That is probably a transparent spectre in the human shape of Eabani, who converses with Gilgamesh. And it's a reference in the footnotes down the bottom. The same ideas, maybe that was his friend Enkidu. The same ideas and beliefs were current among the Hebrews, for when Saul goes on to visit a woman with a familiar spirit at Endor, she brings up Samuel out of the earth, and he answers the questions which Saul wishes to ask. Aren't the Ewoks of Endor? So this Steven Spielberg, being a Jew, or George Lucas, whoever the director was, writer, etc., may have use those old myths, right? Those mythical names, etc. Sure, it's Ewoks of Endor. Among the Assyrians, raiser of the departed spirit. And here's WAI, etc., etc. And here's got Mulisag, Sulug, Gar, Selu, and Kelusu, something on the bottom in the notes. The same ideas and beliefs were current among the Hebrews, for when Saul goes to visit a woman with a familiar spirit at Endor, she brings up Samuel out of the earth, and he answers the questions which Saul wishes to ask. Among the Assyrians, raiser of the departed spirit was a recognised title of the sorcerer, and from this, and in the story of the Gilgamesh epic, it is evident that such practices as necromancy were not uncommon. How far the Utuku differed from the Ekamu, which is the proper word for a departed spirit, is difficult to say. It was a ghost or spectre that either lurked in the desert, lying in wait for man, tablet 3, 28, page 5, or it might have its home in the mountains or sea or graveyard, and evil would befall him on whom it merely cast its eye. The second of the sixth, the Alu, is a demon that hides itself in dark corners and caverns in the rock, haunting ruins and deserted buildings and slinking through the streets at night like a pariah dog. It lies in wait for the unwary, ready to rush out from its hiding place, to envelop him as with a garment, or coming into the bedchamber by night, and steal sleep away from the weary mortals by standing over their beds and threatening to pounce upon them, should they dare to close their eyes. For these, see tablet B. It is a horrible apparition at times without mouth, limbs or ears, a half-human, half-devilish creation, born probably by the ghoulish Lilitu or Adat Lily to some man to whom she has attached herself. Again, see tablet, I think it says there, see tablet B, 18. This later tradition remained current long after Babylon had fallen, and then it reappeared in the rabbinic stories which relate how Lilith bore to Adam demons and spirits. So she gave birth to those. So he had children to her. Or is it saying that she brought forth them in revenge because he rejected her, according to the pseudepigraphy, right? The mythical stories of Lilith. The rabbis were of opinion that a man might have children by allying himself with a demon. Maybe that's what it is. And although they would naturally not be visible to human beings, yet when that man was dying they would hover around his bed, and after his death would hail him as their father. There seems to be an allusion to this monstrous connection in the following extract from an Assyrian hymn to the sun god. He on whom an evil spirit hath thrust, he whom an evil demon hath enveloped in his bed, he whom an evil ghost hath cast down in the night, he whom a great devil hath smitten, he whose limbs an evil god hath racked. Question mark there. He, the hair of whose body an evil fiend hath set on end. Compare Job 4:15. Then a spirit passed before my face, the hair of my flesh stood up. He, the hair of whose body an evil fiend hath set on end. He whom, it's in parentheses there, not too sure what that is, probably, a hag demon hath seized. It's an old, ugly, witchy type, wrinkly, ugly as demon, hath seized. He whom a ghoul hath cast down, he whom a robber sprite hath afflicted, he whom the handmaid and man are translations of the Assyrian words which have special reference to persons of marriageable age. Of the ninth phantom hath wedded the man with whom the handmaid of the ninth phantom hath had union. In other words, they did wham bam, right? The third is the Ikamu or departed spirit, the soul of the dead person for which some reason cannot rest and wanders as a spectre over the earth. After death, the souls of men and women who died in the ordinary course of nature entered into the underworld, the house of darkness, the seat of the god Urkala, the house from which none that enter come forth again, where they remained, trying to eke out a wretched existence by feeding on dust and mud. and receiving the offerings and libations paid to them by their descendants and relations on earth. If, for any reason, these attentions should cease, and the spirit of the dead man be forgotten, then it was forced by hunger and thirst to come forth from its abode in Hades, it's Greek for the grave, right, like Sheol, to seek on earth the food and Sheol in the Hebrew, which means grave. So it comes forth from its abode in Hades to seek on earth the food and water which no longer filtered through to satisfy its wants, and roaming up and down it sought what it might devour. If it found a luckless man who had wandered far from his fellows into haunted places, and footnote indication at the bottom, this is the interpretation of the word mutaliku. Was that mutaliku? Wanderer, which occurs so often in the magical text to indicate the patient. If found a luckless man who had wandered far from his fellows into haunted places, it fastened upon him, plaguing and tormenting him until such times as the priest should drive it away with exorcisms. This is expressly stated on a tablet of this class, which runs: the gods which seize upon man have come forth from the grave, the evil wind gusts have come forth from the grave, and so forth. In making offerings to the dead lies the base of the principle of ancestor worship. The descendants give food and drink to the remains of their forefathers, that they may not need to return to earth to demand from the living the care and attention that is their due. Even in the enlightened period of the later Assyrian Empire, about BC 650, this belief was prevalent among the highest in the land, for we find Ashurbanipal desecrating the ancient tombs of the kings of Elam, carrying away their bones and causing the rites paid to them to cease, so that their spirits might have no rest. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, when the wrath of Eabani has been raised from the dead by Nugal, it describes the underworld, the man whose corpse lieth in the desert, etc. But under certain circumstances, the soul of a dead man never entered the underworld, as is clear from the poem quoted above. The Akumu spirit of an unburied corpse could find no rest, etc., etc. This last line shows that the duty of making oblations to the dead devolved, as was natural, on the Arasan-directed descendants, and this one of the reasons for the overwhelming desire of the Semite for children to perpetuate the family name. There are other instances in which souls cannot obtain rest, and it reads it below. And it continues. Okay, it goes into the night wraith that have no husband, who has the same characteristics as the Lilith of rabbinic tradition, will be referred to again later on. The words "he that hath no posterity" of course refers to the man who has no descendants to pay him due rights. Other ghosts are the women who die in childbirth or while nursing their babies. The idea is that they will return some form to seek their child. Okay, it's got some information here on Night Fiend, and some more of different beliefs of different geographical regions, like the Malayans. In India, the ghost of a woman who, okay, we'll go up further. Okay, this method here. Lang Suya was supposed to be a kind of night owl. This is in the beliefs of the Malayans. Lang Suya was supposed to be a kind of night owl like the Lilith of rabbinic tradition, and is similar therefore to the ghost of which Doughty speaks. Okay, this is some other guy who wrote on that. In India, the ghost of a woman who dies in childbed or childbirth is a very terrible demon indeed. The souls of the devoted temple women who die of disease and of men or maidens who have reached the marriageable age and yet die unmarried are also included in the category of ghosts. Well, they're so angry because They were to be married and then they died, so they didn't complete that which they so desired. And so forth. More a description about these ghosts. Again, it goes on about Lilith. Lilitu or Lilith. The rabbinic literature also is full of legends of her doings. According to tradition, she bore to Adam devils, spirits, and Lilin, i.e. the same word as the Assyrian Lilu. But although there is no doubt that the Lilitu was a night spirit, it is improbable that the Lilith should have any real connection with the Hebrew Laila, night. The rabbis naturally assumed that there was such a connection, and on the face of it, such a comparison was plausible, but the evidence of the Assyrian word Lilu shows that we can no longer accept what would otherwise be a reasonable derivation. If we had to find a Semitic derivation for it at all, and if it has not been taken over from the Sumerian, which seems most probable, it may be connected with Lalu, to be abundant, Lalu, luxuriousness, and Lulu, the civiciousness, wantonness. 2. This is the view held by Martin Text Religieux, page 25. The idea that Lili differs from the Lilut in that her relations with human beings are much closer, and she thus takes over the functions of the Hebrew Lilith, and so forth. The evil man may possibly have an echo in the old rabbinic traditions that the souls of the wicked, when they die, are the devils which are in this world. Eisenmenger 2, page 427. Arabs concerning the jinn, of which half are the malignant and half good demons. And they inhabit the 7 stages which form the edifice of the underworld. In passing, it is worth noting that the Arabic for a madman is Majnun, or one possessed by jinn. The Babylonian devils also dwelt within Eridu as the servants of Ea and Damkina, ready to pounce on the hapless wanderer, and so forth. The ghoul of the Arabs dwells in the desert and appears to travellers in a friendly guise in order to make them lose their way. And in the same way, in the Assyrian belief, it is the traveller who is most liable to attacks. In the occupation of ruins by spectres is a universal superstition. It's global, and one to be explained by the belief that the spirit prefers a house if it can obtain it, and that it selects a deserted habitation because there are no longer in it any amulets or charms or tutelary gods to keep it out. An inhabited house they may attack and force their way in temporarily, but on their presence they become knowing. The owner will at once take steps to render it untenable by them and drive them forth with help of the exorcists. For this reason, also the desert and inaccessible mountains, as affording dwelling far remote from mankind, were assigned as a probable locality for all malignant powers. A Syriac story of the 9th century testifies to this belief concerning ruins, for we read, and while a certain man was passing at night along the roads by the side of a fire temple of the Magians, which had been a ruin for some time, devils sprang out upon him in the form of black ravens, and they entered into him and convulsed him. Budge, Thomas of Marga, Volume 2, page 599. This is quite interesting. These 7 evil spirits. That's what Christ is talking about in the New Testament. He personally thinks that they're clean within. They are for a while, but then 7 spirits enter, 7 evil spirits, worse than the ones that were in them before. These 7 spirits constantly reappear in various shapes and forms in the legends of other Semitic nations. The old Palestinian tradition of the unclean spirit undoubtedly owes something of its origin to them. The unclean spirit, when he has gone out of the man, passes through waterless places, seeking rest and finding none, he saith, I will turn back into my house with that body whence I came out. And when he is come, he findeth it swept and garnished. Then he goes and taketh to him 7 other spirits more evil than himself. But a still more striking evidence of the conservatism of Eastern tradition is shown in a Syriac charm, which is worth quoting in full, and there is below. Don't forget the biblical New Testament scriptures are symbolic. It's not actually talking about a house, you know, that it occupies. But if it is, well, it's a dual action, isn't it? You decide which one it is. And these experts from the Assyrian poems, these 7 spirits altered but little as time went on. You probably could inflict or afflict a house, but I think it's symbolic for a body, right? A person. You know, they enter into a person. Okay, charms and magical preparations. Meteoric iron or aerolites seem to have been used as charm or amulets, and this is quite as intelligible as the use of water, since from the nature of them both they are obtained from the habitations of the gods. But when we come to tamarisk, reeds and other plants or flower, or hear from beasts, it is not so easy to see why such materials should have been adopted for magical purposes. A branch of tamarisk or the date spathe were held aloft in the hand during the exorcism, which was to repel the attacks of demons and lay them under a ban, and this shows that they were possessed of magical power. Here we can see how an idea similar to that of the use of water in magic, for just as water contains the power of the god, here so will any piece of tamarisk contain the emanation of the tree spirit which lives in the sacred tamarisk shrub. Manna is obtained from the tamarisk, and it is very probable that while a branch of the tree itself was brandished aloft as a visible sign, its medicinal products were used internally to cure the patient. Manna is a laxative and a suitable expectorant in febrile affections of the lungs. So maybe the manna from heaven that God fed those people would totally cleanse them out, right? Being a laxative, totally rid them of disease, etc., maybe sickness, etc. But if they really collected more after the Sabbath, and high Sabbath, it being rotten, mouldy, whatever, it could cause them problems if they digested it right. So that's why they're warned. Who knows? And there's something here about Noah and the Ark. Among the Semites, the raven was also always associated with the supernatural. It was one of the birds sent forth by Noah from the Ark. The Arabs consider it a bird of ill omen, which foretells death and disaster, and it is unlawful food according to the Muslim law. In the Syriac history of the Blessed Virgin Mary, editor E.A. Wallace Budge, or edition of E.A. Wallace Budge, page 47, a certain young man is possessed by devils, but they are driven forth by exorcism and take the forms of ravens, and in Thomas of Maga the same belief is testified. One of the stories of Bar Hebraeus relates how in a certain village a troop of devils appeared in the form of men, and they said to the villagers, Behold, a camel hath strayed away from us, give us a man that he may search for him. And when they brought out a man to them to look for the camel, he saw ravens flying about, and he made his escape and went into the village and said, In very truth, these are devils and not men. Furthermore, they have lost no camel. The hawk is another of the magic birds of the East. It was the emblem of Horus in Egypt. 3. Budge, Egyptian Religion, page 107. which at once shows in how great a respect it was held. In the Syriac stories of Alexander, Nectanebus sends a drug to Philip of Macedon, his father, by means of an enchanted hawk, and it showed him a dream. Again, Alexander Budge, page 8. On the other hand, the owl was a bird of ill omen among the Assyrians, as it is among the more modern Semites. Dr. Budge informed the author that in many villages in the Sudan, the same view is held of the Guma, or owl. If an owl hooted over an Assyrian city, it was supposed to be the work of the 7 devils. See page 51. The Arabs of the present day consider the owl to be the wraith of a woman seeking a child. In Syria, an owl heard hooting by the sick man is an omen of his death. It is regarded by the Malagasy as a bird of ill omen, and is called by them the spirit bird, for they think it to be an embodiment of spirits, and its hoot in the night is a presage of evil. All 3 birds were unclean to the Hebrews, according to the Levitical law. Leviticus 11:15-16. Alien also bears witness to these traditions by saying that it is considered by men to be a bird that presages evil. In order to prevent the entrance of demons into the house, the Assyrians hung up various plants near the door. The fleabane, not too sure what that is, on the lintel of the door I have hung St. John's wort, caper, and wheat ears, on the latch I have hung, with a halter as a roving ass, the body I restrain. This custom has survived among the Jews of the present day, who hang aloes or cacti from the arch of the doorway as amulets. Spittle had great power in Babylonian sorcery, particularly in bewitching men or casting spells upon them. And it carries on. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, add your comments below this video, tell us what you thought of it, and then go share this with all your family, friends and others.